Welcome to the Gravel Lot, the place where bikes are for everyone.
The Gravel Lot podcast is presented by Be Free Ride Bikes Apparel, providing a fully customized cycling apparel experience to provide you and your team the attention to detail and personal touch that you deserve.
And also brought to you by Grimpour Brothers Coffee, offering handmade coffee roasted weekly in small batches to give you the finest quality coffee to start your day. Choose their subscription service and earn your free bag of coffee today.
Also by BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop in Cincinnati, Ohio, offering you a full host of bike fitting services intended to provide the cycling enthusiast with the most efficient, comfortable, and sustainable bike fit they have ever had.
And by the Ritual All Natural Skincare, providing small batch, handmade chamois cream custom blended for your team or shop right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Contact us today to learn more.
And by Hand Up Gloves. Great gear, better times. Providing a wide range of apparel for bikes, snow sports, and golf in multiple designs and fits to let your personality shine.
Our goal with the Gravel Lot is to inspire cyclists of all stripes to ride bikes, share their story, and have fun. We love all bikes and anyone who wants to ride them. So no matter where you sit on the spectrum of bikes, we'll always have a place for you in the Gravel Lot.
And now, the hosts of TGL, John Woolry and Doug McClintock.
Hello again, and welcome back to the Gravel Lot, the place for all things bike. And no matter what ride you guys are specifically on this week, you will always have a home here in the Gravel Lot. As always, I'm John. The other guy in the room is Doug, and we are so glad that you guys found us. So whether you are an existing Pebble or a new person to the show,
you're now a Pebble.
Yeah, you're now a Pebble because we're all Pebbles in the Gravel Lot of life. Welcome to our show. We are always excited that you found us, but I think tonight especially, because this is a big one for everybody. So if you like what you hear, press the subscribe button. Hit the like, hit the notifications, all of those things that all the cool kids do. And if you want to become a Patreon supporter today, comment down below, get your AMA questions in now. I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of them that stack up over the next hour or so.
Oh, yeah.
So start with the comments now. Let us know what you think. Let us know what questions you want answered. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those places. So with that out of the way, let's get this started because I think there's a lot to cover today. Doug, how was your ride this week?
Epic, dude. Like this weekend, Ellen and I got BMX bikes because, it's a pandemic and why would you not?
N+2.
Yeah. So N+2 for the law offices of Foster McClintock, which is what we call our home. We decided that Ellen was like, I want to learn how to ride BMX. And she's like all about learning skills, but not, she's real good at like breaking those things down. But she was like, look, I don't want to stress out about as I'm coming back from this injury, like having to be fit enough to go ride with my friends.
Yep.
And like having to put the training load in to be able to go do a 40, 50.
Just to get back to square whatever.
Right. And she has a cool like cruiser bar bike. I don't. Like my bar bike needs completely rebuilt and I don't want to spend a dime on it right now. So nobody's
going to bars, Doug.
Right. But like they're coming because she's vaccinated and I will be soon. So we're like, we need bikes for the neighborhood and we're trying to get a bike space built in the neighborhood, which would be kind of cool if we could do it. But it was like, let's get BMX bikes and get good at manuals and riding fakie and doing all this stuff. So we got BMX bikes and I'm super stoked. So I got a Fit TRL. It's kind of their longest, biggest bike you can get. It's a 2XL and it actually feels like a tiny itty bitty mountain bike. So I'm super stoked to let you ride it and go off some sweet jumps. So ready.
Yeah, I like that. I like that just because it is, I think a lot of people right now, whether it's they picked up their COVID-19 or whatever, freshman 15, whatever you want to call it. And they're just feeling like, oh man, I dread the idea of going back on group rides because I'm going to get dropped, or all of those, whatever those neurotic things are that we all have about going and riding with our friends and not being able to keep up or whatever. But it's like that bike almost forces you to just focus on the enjoyment and just, and just hang out and have fun and put your feet down and do silly stuff.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point. Enjoy. I won't, trust me. I'm not good enough to hurt myself. So it's fine. I can keep these things on the ground. So, well, how's your ride, John? How's your ride been this week?
Good. George got his second vaccine shot. We're already kind of on the other side of he had symptoms. Yes. Thankfully he was a Pfizer. We were talking about this last week. Moderna girls and Pfizer boys. He was a Pfizer boy. And that one is statistically showing that it has lower prevalence of symptoms, and the symptoms that it does generate are less, just again, statistically. So he had all of them.
He was good.
But enough
that
that he was still moving around and he wasn't debilitated by it. And he's already talking about at 82 and COPD and terminal cancer patient, talking about wanting to go get a job at the grocery store again. So he
doesn't stop. He
got his second vaccine and he is just like full speed ahead. And last week there was a ton of snow on the ground and I was like shoveling holes in my yard for my dogs to go to the bathroom. And now I can go outside and wear t-shirt and shorts. So Ohio, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Welcome to Ohio. Yeah. It's not like the Welcome to Miami song, but it's like similar. So
right. Similar. Yeah. With more. Yeah. I was going to say with more clothes, but I just said we're wearing less clothes, whatever. So let's move. Like, let's dig in. So it's a big day.
Yeah.
So first off, I think before we start this interview, for everybody in the chat, for everybody listening to this, we need to level set. We hear you. We had so many submissions. Everybody has an axe to grind with today's guest, with the organization that he runs. And we all have our specific quote unquote thing that we want to focus on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we actually honored all of the submissions that you sent us, it would be 10 hours of chat. And while that'd be awesome, everyone has to use the bathroom, and that would this is just not feasible for us to make this happen.
Yes.
So we have taken the few hundred, this is a lot of information that you have all sent us. We've taken a few hundred submissions and we kind of started putting them in buckets. We've been finding commonalities and trying to figure out ways that we can address kind of the larger topics and drill down into those spaces. And we tried to kind of get that all built out. So just full disclosure, if you sent us something, we thought about it, we brought it in, we synthesized it, and we've made a thing. I don't know what it all really looks like, but we will see as we roll through it. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome our fellow Cincinnati native, well, not native, but Cincinnati resident at one point in time. Our guest this week has been involved in countless brands and a number of amazing things. So you probably have some things that this person has metaphorically touched in your home, but more local to us. He spent a ton of time at P&G and is a huge part of the Cincinnati area and community. Apparently, we found out earlier that he has a key to the city of Cincinnati.
And I've always wondered, does that every door?
It does.
Is it a skeleton
Everyone's
key
house.
to Cincinnati? Just
it opens
hi,
everyone's
I'm here.
house.
Can I have dinner?
You can just go to everyone's house and open it right out. But most importantly, he is the president and CEO of USA Cycling. His name is Rob DeMartini, and we cannot wait to get into this. Rob, welcome to the Gravel Lot.
Doug, John, thank you for having me. I appreciate the chance to chat with you guys and hear from all the folks that follow your show, and hopefully try to answer a few of those questions. And most importantly, just, share the passion that I have, but more importantly, that the staff at USA Cycling has for the sport of cycling. So I'm looking forward to the next hour.
And I think it goes without saying, by one, the sheer volume of questions that people submitted and the fervency of how they were written. I think that's probably that's probably the most accurate or the most accurate word to use for it. I think that speaks to the level of passion that folks have for cycling and how the sport moves forward. So I think with that, today's show is going to be slightly different in terms of the way that we've normally done things. Normally we start with, how'd you discover bikes? And we talk through your career a little bit. But I think because there is such a huge dearth of things that we want to talk about, I think we move forward a little bit. And I think starting from you, just like we just level set everybody for the show and listening to kind of how we're going to attack this, I think level setting for you, I want to talk about your first impression of USAC as you were doing your research before interviewing for the position, and talking with a headhunter and kind of how that all worked out coming from the running world, and doing some of your research initially into this position. Now, I'm curious what your first impressions of USA Cycling were.
Well, I think, you might have covered this in the intro, but I don't have a bike racing background. I have been in exactly 2 bike races, both of them since I joined USA Cycling. Don't bother looking in the results because you got to go down pretty far to find me. But
Right down by where I'm at. It's all right, Rob.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's our section of the field.
yeah, but I'd become a fan of the sport really indirectly by some of the work I did while I was at New Balance. I didn't even take. I mean, I obviously rode a bike as a kid, but I didn't take to riding as a sport until probably my mid 40s when I started running less. And combination of life's cruel. When you have the time to run, you no longer have the body that can do it. So I started cycling instead and did it by myself for a while. Then joined a local. We weren't a club, but just a group. And I simultaneously was looking for a way to get New Balance when I was working there on television in Europe. And I knew I couldn't afford to buy advertising across all these European countries, but I watched what Garmin had done at the time. And I thought, well, that would work for us. So we became a sponsor of what's today the EF team, but back then was the Garmin Transitions team. And that kind of got me under the rope or under the tent. And I realized what an incredible sport it was. And from there, my passion just grew. I ride a lot, never very fast and never very far, but often. And I saw, to your question, John, I stepped down at New Balance at the end of 2018 and I had no plan, except my wife said, "You're not going to be home for lunch every day, are you?" And so the first thing I did was I bought a bike shop. Had never run retail before. I'd obviously opened up 3,500 retail stores while I was at New Balance, but never operated one firsthand. And I wanted to get into it. I wanted something to do. So I bought a bike shop in Park City. And about a week after that, I got a call from the board at USA Cycling and said, "Would you have any interest in talking to?" They actually called me to get leads for who might do the job. And I knew one thing when I stepped away from New Balance, I wanted to do something really different. And I didn't know exactly what that was, but I didn't want to take another, traditional job like the one I'd had. So I started doing some research and I saw huge opportunity. I'll tell you what I didn't see. What's the word you use? Fervent. I didn't see the passion that was embedded in our current and past members. And I've since certainly seen that and been singed by it a few times. But I saw a huge opportunity. I still see it today, 18 months later and a pandemic later, hopefully. This sport has real opportunity to become bigger, broader, more inclusive. And as an outcome of that, this country can win more medals, but we got a lot of work to do between here and there.
I think it's awesome that you approached it kind of from where a lot of people do, which is a participatory thing that you enjoyed because you had to change your life. Instead of, I think there's a lot of people who come to this sport, or at least leadership in the sport, that come to this place because they're ex-pros or they're ex-racers. And I think that's interesting that wasn't your path, because it gives you kind of a different lens to look through this. So as you had just kind of the outside look of USA Cycling, as you came on and this opportunity actually blossomed, what was it like as you started getting onboarded? And were you looking at other NGBs for inspiration, or were you looking at things from your professional career? What was that mix in your head like at the time?
Doug, a little bit of both. So I understood the P&L and the balance sheet and the reality that USA Cycling was facing before I started. I knew it was a failing business model. I'm not talking about the services we provide or the quality of events or the quality of the officials. A lot of that was in very good shape, but the core business model was failing. And it's my belief that racing, particularly road racing, but racing of all types, can no longer be supported simply by selling racing licenses to a very small collection of all cyclists. So I had a good sense of that. I had less of a sense, probably a good thing, less of a sense of the reputation we'd earned in the marketplace and the lack of clarity we'd brought to what we do. I mean, or what we should do is maybe a better way to say it. I regularly get emails around things like selection of world championship teams and why is there a pothole on my favorite ride? And we've got to declare to the market, here's what we are in the business of, and we're not in the business of some of these other things, there are other great organizations that are, and we should be their champion. And I'll tell you more about that as we go.
Okay, so that kind of transition perfectly. There's probably a couple things that we can come back to and touch on that specifically as we get further down the tracks. But I think this is a great opportunity for you to really explicitly state what is the mission of USA Cycling. Like, what is your, call it mission, vision, whatever that statement is. What are the actual action items that you guys want to be the best in the world at?
Yeah, I mean, we've crafted that new mission under the headline, 3 words: we champion cycling. Now, embedded in there is we need to win. We need to win at the highest levels, really for a couple of reasons. But one is, a third of our funding source comes from the U.S. Olympic Committee based on our previous and projected performance. And it's a tall, the Olympics in this country are funded very differently than some countries. To give you a comparison, the money we get from the USOPC every quad, and think about that as an Olympic cycle. This one happened to be 5 years, but typically they're 4.
Right.
We get about $10 million spread to us, in 4 $2.5 million installments, based on the fact that we won 5 medals in Rio. And that was about 15% of the contested medals. So we need to win to grow the money. I mean, the U.S. Olympic Committee has money and they distribute it, trying to reinforce winning programs. But the other part of this sport, and this is the one I was much more familiar with, is that sports grow in the shadow of its stars. And every sport works this way. Whether it's Michael Jordan or Kate Courtney, kids look up and they say to their moms and dads, "Can I do that?" And they need to be able to have a clear path to do that. And that's a big part of making this sport more popular. And I think, in my opinion, cycling is still very niche-y, very niche-y. And that's not a bad or a good thing, but it's a hard place to grow from. And I think there's specific things we can do to help it grow faster.
So as you look at that, right, you walk into a position in a very niche sport that has a very delineated way of operating. It is operated this way and it will always operate this way. And damn the torpedoes, we're never changing anything. If you touch anything, you have to pull back a stump because we're taking your fingers off. How do you walk into that space and deal with the legacy of that from a leadership perspective and start to change not only your mentality from like, okay, now I've got to deal with this situation, but start changing the mentality of the people in the organization and then start looking beyond the organization? What does that process look like for you?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm only starting it, so I can only talk about what I'm trying to do and not what's been accomplished yet, because, I want to be judged on the results of the organization.
For sure.
Performance of the sport, not the promises I make on a podcast. So, that big caveat up front. It first comes up with getting people to see the things we have alike more than the things we have of difference. Everything from a masters racer to a youth entering NICA, from BMX to the World Tour road events. I mean, we're talking about a super broad collection of cohorts of consumer groups that they don't even know they're in the same group. And that's not their problem, that's ours. We got to figure out how to connect with each of these sub-tribes, if you will, and find out what's in common, how can we serve them, and how can we help contribute to this being a great hobby or a great career, depending on where you fall on that collective. And some of it is, as I said before, it's trying to make clear what it is we do. And so we've moved to this We Champion Cycling position, saying we're going to focus on 3 things: youth, infrastructure, and winning. And I think they're equally important to different constituents. Some people will tell me all that matters is Olympic medals. Other people will tell me crystal clearly they don't matter at all. But we got to find our way through that. And so what we've chosen to focus on is getting more kids on bikes, building the infrastructure so they can stay on bikes, and then winning at the top level so we can inspire.
So I think it's really important right here to pause, and for anyone listening to this or watching right now, all of your 2019 and previous 2020 probably not the best numbers to look at from how like financial performance wise, because
for anyone,
not
even my bank account, it was not great.
It just wasn't good across the board. But I think like looking back at 2019, this is some of the stuff that Doug and I were doing is looking at total income, looking at how the dispersion of US OPC money comes in. $10 million over 4 years for the myriad different events that the United States is participating in from a cycling perspective is peanuts. Like if you think about like if everybody listening thinks about it from that perspective, it is not a lot to start with. But then digging a little bit further, in 2019 we see just shy of $1.7 million loss on memberships income versus memberships in event income. So that's where I go back to what you were saying about it was a failing business model. You guys do the best training for officials. You give the best support currently domestically in the United States, the best program kind of kit out of the box for starting an event, for insuring it, for just basically all of those pieces of infrastructure to know that you're covered, to know that you're doing it the right way, and that everybody can kind of have the experience that they want. That's a big loss in a year. So you're dealing with numbers coming into this, again, back to that legacy piece that is they're not good. So what are some of the things initially that in digging into those pieces that you saw as, okay, what doesn't align with this vision? How do we one, stop the bleeding, but then two, actually start to focus on how do we move this thing forward?
Yeah. And, I'll explain it in a simple format, and then recognizing it's simple, you guys choose where you want to dig in deeper. But the way I look at it is simply like this. Racers, if you take the broadest view of racers, so licensed and unlicensed racers. And what I mean by that is everybody who enters a road race or a mountain bike race that we sanction, and then the top 15 or 20% in the gravel community who are at the front of that point, maybe unlicensed, if you will, unsanctioned events. That community in the U.S. is maybe 250,000 people. It's probably more like 150,000 people. Okay. Then you look at active cyclists, people who would define to their friends cycling or bike riding or mountain biking, whatever you call it. The cyclist term is heavily loaded because it means certain things to certain people, but
yeah, for sure.
Bikers, that's probably 7 million people. Okay. Think about the lifespan of a biker or a cyclist. It's, theoretically 10 to 70. So I've been focusing on 1 out of 100 for a period of time of their riding life that is maybe 15%. So we've just been looking at the wrong thing. I mean, if we had a different business model, if I could start from zero, I'd charge everybody $10 for a window sticker, and I wouldn't charge you for a racing license because I wouldn't need to, because we'd have 1 million members if we did good in the space. And I think we can do good. But, again, I'm not questioning the decisions that were made before me. They were made by different people at different times. Yeah. And I'm not going to sit here and say they're wrong. What I'm saying is 100,000 bike racers cannot support bike racing and 1,200 officials and getting 20 national championships on $100 a year.
Well,
so go ahead.
And to be fair, I think we all have to state the obvious here that bike racing needs to stop being responsible for supporting bike racing.
100%.
Well, and the way I've thought about it is, instead of selling you a compliance product, what if I sold you an affinity, belonging product? So for the sake of this, call this a window sticker and a hat. And we targeted at 7 million instead of 100,000. It changes the economics dramatically. I don't really have a cost of goods. We're selling a mission, yeah, you get some benefits, but they're typically delivered by third-party affiliate partners. From us, you get the infrastructure that's been built by really passionate people in Colorado Springs. So we're aiming at the wrong market. The racers are part of it, but cyclists is a much bigger and broader group.
And I think I want to put something into a little box here, because I think it's important to just kind of sidebar this and put this in a box, because this is one thing that you can quibble about. This official at this moment did this thing, or we've got some comments like that.
Sure
and you can argue about, hey, I don't like this rule or all that, but there are processes and situations and all of those things in the USA Cycling ecosystem that allow all that to flow up. But one thing that USA Cycling does do, and I would say rather well in general, is provide for the sanctioning and officiating of races in that space. That's something I can't imagine trying to give that to someone else right now in any specific way. So that sort of service is definitely a thing that it's amazing that USA Cycling provides, because no NGB does that. Like, I can't, like,
not to that level.
No, and especially not for 40-year-old ding dongs like me, who are like, hey, I want to race heads up with this person and tell them how bad they are and try to make them cry for the next week till I see them at the site. Like you're providing a really strange thing that doesn't really exist in any other sport because of the way cycling's structured. So I want to put kind of that perspective of what you provide as a service into one box and say, okay, that service that's provided, given whatever foibles and problems and challenges it has, exists, and it can just kind of go over there.
And by no means, Doug, we're not perfect. We make mistakes every day, but the service provided to the sport of cycling, when I first started, and before I knew the pandemic was going to be all over us, I went on a listening tour. I went to Trek, to Specialized. I went to bike clubs. I went to longtime members. I went to people who have never heard of us, and asked them questions. What do we do? What should we do? And the list of answers was just as long. And what I'm, trying to convince our team today is, at least there needs to be an order. What are we going to do first? What are we going to do second? What are we going to do third? How do we continue to provide, support to 2,500 sanctioned events? I get into this insurance argument all the time. There is nobody that will provide an event organizer the quality of insurance we provide at the price we provide it. The reason I know that is I'm the largest buyer and we subsidize it.
Right.
Now, I will tell you this. If you ask a different question, can I buy cheaper insurance? Hell yes, you can. Now, if I'm an event organizer, I look at that as part of my cost of goods, and it's something I would never cheat on, because if I get burned, guess whose house they're coming after?
Yeah.
Not mine.
Right.
But that's a service we should do. We should make it. It's particularly true of small events. The insurance market is hardening dramatically now in sport. You're not going to be able to put on an event with insurance if you don't come to us, and we're going to subsidize it because we want 100-person events.
Right.
We want 50-person events, and sure, we want 5,000-person events too. But that's not how the sport grows. People don't enter those first. They come to a 50 or 100 first to see, what's this all about?
Right. And that's where I think it's this was part of our disclaimer in the intro is let's like pause for a second and like get out of the weeds a little bit, because we're kind of diving into the weeds on like a very specific piece, and go back to, you said something very specific. You said youth, infrastructure, and winning. So my question to you is, okay, if you're having these debates about this is what we need to do first, this is what we need to do second, this is what we need to do third, currently right now, as it sits with I guess pre-pandemic, that's probably the clearest answer of all of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like for pre-pandemic USAC, again, fully understanding that this is going to be different when we come out the other side of COVID-19. What were the things that don't align to that mantra? Because I love what you're saying about sticker and a hat and get it out to as many people as possible and talk about, I love bikes. I don't necessarily need to race bikes, but I love bikes and I want to tell people I love bikes. 26.2 sticker or the Iron Man tattoo that we've talked about hundreds of times on this show now. Like, what is stopping you from going from where we are now to there?
I don't think anything is, except the clarity of communicating that mission and then sticking to it. And, what I saw previous was a classic, binder of our strategic plan. Our strategic plan now is on one piece of paper. I don't need a binder. And so you're seeing the beginnings of those moves. We made youth membership this year free. In a year when my revenue is going to be down between 40 and 60%, we chose to cannibalize our sales by making, and I'm going to forget the number, I think we had about a little less than 10,000 youth members. You don't need to buy a membership anymore if you're under 18. You get it for free. Why? Because more kids racing is good. And they don't start as racers. I'm not stupid about making the license free. It doesn't turn you into a racer, but it takes one barrier away. So, we had a long conversation with the board. We had a long conversation with my CFO, and all supportive, but saying, is now the right time? Well, if we don't change, we will no longer exist. And so we're going to do the hard choices and stick to it. So we've done 3 things on kids. We made youth membership free. We finally reached an agreement to be a financial supporter of NICA after a decade of fighting over reasons that Steve Matus and I can't even figure out what the hell we were fighting over, but we were. NICA is a fantastic organization. I think they're up to 33 leagues right now. And, we want to see them have 100 or whatever their plan is. I want to see them grow as fast as they can. And we're completely complementary. And we were hearing from NICA parents, how come my kid shows up at a national championship and isn't in the call up? Because his results were not in our records. Because the two organizations were fighting.
Yeah.
While the poor 15-year-old's thinking, I don't know what this is about. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah,
I just want to race bikes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to ride my bike and beat other kids.
So free youth, a partnership with NICA and other groups like NICA. There's not another one of their size, but there's really good development organizations around the country. And then the third one is we're starting a program actually at test markets this month called Let's Ride. And Let's Ride are free couple-hour camps in and around 2 things: places where bikers already are, so maybe existing ride events, or neighborhoods that otherwise don't have any access to riding, underprivileged neighborhoods, to try to get more kids started. They'll be conducted by our clubs and coach network and by our national champions, and they'll be 100% free. And, you asked a question earlier, did I look at other NGBs? I've kind of modeled it after swimming. If you throw a kid, my kids swam at Turpin Swim Club in Cincinnati, Ohio. And when you threw a 5-year-old in the pool, they're immediately connected to USA Swimming. Maybe they don't even know it.
First they got
to be clear, don't throw your kid in the pool. Don't throw your, metaphorically throw your kid in the pool.
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
Right. And, we need something to connect with kids early so they can look up and say, hey, who's Kate Courtney? Who's Chloe Dygert? Who's Quinn Simmons? Who's, whatever the athletes at the top. This sport's like every other. The stars will help us make it popular, not the talking heads like me.
I think that the more we lean in on the kids thing, it's great because you start to open the funnel, right? Like if you get in at 10, then you're maybe with this till you're 70, right? Like, and that's I think where a lot of these initiatives have gone. And I think this is good because you're not trying to remake what NICA is doing. You don't have to do
You don't
what
need to.
NICA
We're
does,
completely complementary.
right? You don't have to do what IMBA does. You don't have to do what People for Bikes does. Those things are discrete functions. So is there anything in this process, as you've started to add things that you're leaning into, that you've been like, that's not us. Let's get rid of it. We don't need to do that.
Doug, I'd say it differently is that, and I've had these discussions with Steve Matus at NICA. I've had them with Jen Dice at PFB. I had them with Tim Blumenthal before. We picked the words carefully. This mission of We Champion Cycling. I can't fill potholes. I can't get bike lanes. I'm not built for that. But we can champion those who do. And somehow USA Cycling got itself tucked into the corner where only racers and quite frankly, only road. And why? We should sit in the middle and champion everybody's efforts. Many of these things, whether it's trail building, whether it's road safety, these are local issues. They are not federal, national, or, they exist everywhere, but they're solved locally. So I want USA Cycling to be the champion of those efforts and to support it, hands open, and raise those up. And instead of picking winners, we're going to say, I don't know who's going to win. I don't want to make that prediction. I want you all to win. How can we help? And so that's what we've started to do. We've funded something called the Youth Cycling Alliance with PFB that has, I think there's 20 different grassroots youth programs trying to figure out, God forbid, what if we work together? Could we get more done than trying to do it individually? And as you guys know, one of the challenges of scaling anything that starts grassroots, I mean, John, you said it in the warm up, it's typically driven by a couple of people.
Yeah.
So by definition, you can't do in Cincinnati, you can't duplicate it in Louisville unless you have that person. And so we got to figure out how to harness grassroots and scale it a natural way instead of trying to force it.
So two things. I think first it's important to point that maybe using Chloe and Quinn as your examples, as your lead examples, probably not the best lead. But I think second to that, looking at it from where you are now, why do you think it was the foundation of we have to be the decider of everything, we have to be the be all end all, we have to be involved in every aspect of this that got to this unsustainable business model? Because I think that's what, like, that was my first impression. I'm
going to come back to Chloe and Quinn because I see the world a little differently here. But let me, on the second half of that question, I don't make the connection you're making that it was we got to be everything end all. I think what happened was this sport, again, this is my observation and I didn't grow up here. So I start with, I don't know what I don't know. I think this sport had a huge tailwind from the Lance era that was handled poorly by us and others, never been accountable for. I mean, and it's left a bad taste in people's mouth. And on top of that, we're a litigious society. The introduction of phones and cars and bikes is a bad combination. And this sport's got a headwind now that it's never had before. And I'm not pinning that on anybody. I'm saying we got to deal with the reality the way it exists today. And we fought with the mountain biking community for long times, and people say we wrecked it. I don't know what the history is there, what that means, but I know that some of our brightest stars are growing up in NICA and coming to USA Cycling and going to do great things. And there's no better example than Kate or Chris Blevins or the
absolutely
folks that are coming through the system. So I don't think, I guess what I'm not buying, I don't think we did this to ourselves. I also don't think we're faultless in this at all. It almost doesn't matter. I want the path forward. We spend so much time looking back, and yeah, it's good to look back to say, don't repeat the same mistakes, but to fester on it.
Yes.
And this sport, we talked it in the pre-opening, unlike what I'm used to in the running market, this sport is, I mean, I don't know how many stories I've had about what went wrong in 1983. Who cares?
It's bad. And I will say, I appreciate you saying that, because there is some clarity of don't be encumbered by your baggage. Like we talked a little bit about in the opening with Doug's show with the Tears Per Kilogram TGL shirt of everybody has their baggage, but I think from a business pragmatic perspective, it is very important for the future to not be hemmed up by what's gone on in the past. And I think that goes for folks inside the four walls at Colorado Springs, but also everybody listening to this, everybody that's ever bought a USAC membership and said, they're done for me. They're canceled because of this one wedge issue. Like, I think everybody needs to take a second and like actually learn and move forward and figure out, okay, Rob is going to talk and he's going to tell me about what they want to do moving forward. I want to listen because I'm still invested in this. I clearly still have emotional investment in cycling.
Care about cycling. Right.
Yeah. And that is everybody's bottom line. And that's the foundational point of all of this.
So if we can get to that space and start from there and then say, okay, we have challenges. There are challenges within our sport. There are challenges within the world, but how do we acknowledge those things and start to right those wrongs by doing good moving forward? And I think there's that motion that we're seeing in spaces. And I think this is why this conversation is important, Rob, because we have to be able to talk through these things together so that we can, take the input from these folks and distill it out of just like the thing in 1983 where an official stuck his stick through my wheel and I flew over the handlebars, right? That part isn't necessarily constructive, but I think this is more so in that space because we're talking about where we need to head and how we're going to get there as a community. And if anything that this show is about community.
I agree with everything you said there, Doug. I mean, I would like USA Cycling to help foster a community that supports the sport at every level, wins at the top, gets kids on bikes at the bottom, and in the middle helps build infrastructure. So if you want to go, small R, race your bike, there's events for you to do it. And if you want to do it with a capital R, there's events to do that.
You're leading right into my next question is I think we covered youth and we've covered some of your agendas that you're working for on getting more kids on bikes. We'll love to see the reporting and like you said at the beginning, like those are all great things to say, but grade me on our outcomes. So yeah, let's all do that. Let's all hold USAC accountable for getting more kids on bikes in 2021 and beyond. And then talking about more infrastructure, which leads to this question is USAC moving forward considering ways to get into, I don't know how to frame it other than to get into the 5K and 10K market of these. I want to go beat my personal best, but I don't necessarily want to line up with 100 other rabid fools and like go race my balls off. I just want to go finish a thing. And
right.
This is where the obvious elephant in the room of gravel events comes up.
Sure.
And because they are the tangential to the 5-10K.
Right. And I want to give one more piece of framing. If we look at tri or running or any of those things, none of us, and Rob, you're very familiar with the Flying Pig here in Cincinnati. It's a notoriously hard marathon. If I'm going to go do my first Flying Pig, I don't think I'm getting anything other than my finisher's medal if I possibly can make it across the line. But what I'm trying to do is do a thing. And while there are pointy people up at the top and they're going real fast and doing their business, I have you're like, the Flying Pig is not like, hey, Doug, we're going to build a class for people who've been running for 1 week, and then you can go try to beat them, and you guys can rub and race in the corners. That's how cycling is built.
Yeah.
Do you think there's that opportunity to change that? And like, what do you see that happen? Because that's very different in the way our world operates from running.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I've learned that since I got here. I tell this story all the time. When we became the New York Marathon sponsor at New Balance, my daughter and I were running the Brooklyn Marathon, and Michael Caparasso, who was the leader of the event at the time, came to me at the start and was trying to do me a favor. And he said, hey, he grabbed us out of our 8.5 minute pen or wherever we were standing, and he put us up in the elite group. And the first 5 minutes were absolutely terrifying because we were being passed by everybody for the first 7 miles until our path caught us. And I realized in bike racing why that can't happen. It's not safe.
Right.
But I will tell you that there's a whole lot that we take the categorization and the rules, we take it, I think, too far. And luckily Chuck Hodge is in charge of this in my group instead of me, because I've suggested lots of stupid things that originally he was polite. Now he just tells me that's stupid. But we've got to make this sport more approachable. And it doesn't mean damaging the tradition, and it doesn't mean making it unsafe. But, if you stand at the fence of a crit and you've never ridden one, there's nothing you're going to see that's going to say, I think I want to go do that.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah, you're definitely preaching to the choir on that one.
So we got to find ways. I actually had this conversation.
Was twilight. Oh God, I was so scared. I was like, at night, I don't want to do this.
So we got to, you don't, when you run a 5 or a 10K, there's no intimidation, only what what's in here.
Yeah.
But you go up and that, hey, I can run 11-minute miles and I'm going to finish and I'll get a minute faster when I do my 10K. But we need that ramp up. And, I think Nike does a fabulous job of this for sure. But, every event should have, novice is almost not the right way to talk about it, but we need an every person, an every woman event, that every man event that people can do and get a flavor of it, because how they graduate up is not up to us.
Right.
It's up to them. We just need to create conditions that don't make it feel like, if I took up golf by going out and playing with, a collegiate team and got embarrassed by the end of the second hole, you just walk away.
Right.
And I think the sport has done too much of that. I see it. I told you guys, I own a bike shop on the side, and people come in. It's an intimidating, quirky, I didn't know that your glasses are supposed to go on the outside of your straps. Who gives a crap about stuff like that?
Sure.
They'll learn in their own time.
The problem is, Rob, that people actually care about that in their own weird way, and we have to stop that crap.
Yeah.
Well, I just think if people they're out here to have fun. That should be the
Amen.
number one.
Yeah.
If you have fun, then you're going to do it again. And if you don't have fun, you're going to hang it up and go try something else.
Well, and that's why I love what you're saying about creating this kind of kiddie pool environment for. I can still vividly remember signing up for and doing my first bike race, and like the nerves were very similar to doing my first 5K, but then when you're literally lining up next to people, that like there's a certain level of lizard brainness that comes in, of fight or flight, that percolates that to a whole nother level. And making it I was lucky enough that mine was, the first cross race of our year, and it is the most low key at all. There's only tape in a couple of the actual spots. So it is like a great entry level to the sport. And I had a great time and I had a great race, and you could bet your ass that I was lined up next week in the Cat 4 race, because that was my next logical point to go from where I was. And so that's where there has to be, it's just like retail sales, right? You need a giant funnel at the top, and then as you get closer to the final sale, it gets slimmer and slimmer. And as you get closer to the Kate Courtney's, like the pickings get slimmer and slimmer.
The air gets super thin, and that's
right.
Just like every other sport. But I think USAC in particular has spent way too much time just on the pointy end of that funnel. And what's our contribution to the top? And we can and will make those. And free youth, let's ride camps, partnerships with great youth organizations. That's how we're starting.
So I'm curious, and I will also give you compliments that I think personally that it is leadership's job to come up with the crazy ass ideas, and then it's everyone else's job around you to say, no, we can't do that because of this, this, and this. What about this as an idea? Because I feel like it's your job to stretch the rubber band as far as possible, and you're coming at it from a historically wildly successful participation sport, and cycling is not that. So I think it's important to give credit where credit is due. But I'm wondering, are you willing to share some of those wild ass ideas that have gotten thrown out in terms of like how you go from entry level up through the feeder system? Like let's talk about the cutting room floor.
Shouted down in the boardroom, the one that got you shouted down in the boardroom. You're like, what we're gonna do is get whales and we're gonna put them on bikes.
I don't know if this is going to meet that criteria or not, but got a helicopter in the background here. When Chuck and I were traveling to Knoxville last, I think it was either May or June for the Road Nationals, and I didn't realize all the quirkiness about the jerseys and when you can wear them and when you can't. And I look at our national champion jerseys a little bit like green jackets at the Masters. Once you've won one, you have it. It's yours forever. You may not be the current owner, but you are an owner for the year you have it. And I said, well, how come we don't put their name on the back? We don't let them wear them in the competition. And I was told, well, tradition, that's not what we do. They take it off before the race. And I said, so there's no defending champ. I'm forgetting who was the road champ. It's the two brothers from Tennessee going into that race in 19, but when Alex Howes won it. But I said, there's no defending champ in the race. And they said, well, he's there. He just doesn't get to wear the jersey. And I said, well, how would a fan ever know who the defending champ is? Well, they just know. Well, I don't know. I still can't remember the guy's name. I mean, and just stuff like that. So I said, well, I want to change the rules. That not only, and I actually explained this to the athletes, they didn't love it, but I said, how about this? You wear it through your loss, and then you award it to the next person, the next man or woman. And they said, oh, I don't like that at all. I said, what? Well, I don't want to hand it to somebody else. I'm thinking, but that's part of the rivalry. You're not losing it. You're welcoming somebody else into the club. Well, we changed it in the U.S. law. And I say regulation. And 2 months later, UCI wrote Chuck and said, no, that's not how we do it. Can't do that. So at the Nationals this coming year, Alex will have to take off his jersey and race in his trade team jersey. And, it's not a big deal, but the reason, the background behind it, this is my firm belief that Kate, Alex, anybody, whatever trade team you're on, those are powerful jerseys. But when they put on the red, white, and blue, that's when they're the loudest. I watched Travis McCabe and 5 other very young riders turn the Tour of California into a very interesting story a year ago, May. And, we were worried these kids were going to get blown out the back, and they damn near won a couple of stages. Travis almost beat Sagan, and the fans were rooting for the jersey. They were rooting for America
because they know it's an American, right? Like that.
You got to unlock more of that.
Yeah. So
I'm sure if you write Chuck and say, what are Rob's stupid ideas? He's got an actual list.
He's got like a binder in his office. He's this
is my trash can binder. Okay. So we've talked about youth. We talked about infrastructure, and you're kind of talking about it already. The USAC contribution to racing. Can you talk about, just try and again distill it as much as possible? What is the USAC current contribution to the pointy end when those riders pull on the red, white, and blue?
Well, I mean, I think, it depends on the discipline and whether trade teams exist. So we share the responsibility where the trade teams are strong. And then in places where they're not, like in track, it's just us. But we won 5 medals in Rio. That's as I said earlier, that's about 15% of what was contested. I did benchmark up against the best American NGBs. Track and field typically wins about 35% of the contested medals. Swimming wins almost 50%.
Good at that. We're pretty good at track and field.
Yeah. Well, and Doug, that's where I was going. When I asked Jim Miller to come back, I said, can we win as much as swimming? Can we win almost 50% of the medals? And he said, yeah, get me $25 million a quad and we can do it. And for what it's worth, that's half what Great Britain has. Right. They have about 50 because they're funded through the lottery.
Yeah.
And I said, that's what I want to do. If we can figure out how to do it, will you come back and lead the coaching effort? And he signed on for it. So, we want to get a lot better, be in the range of track and field and swimming. And is there a reason why Americans can't do that well? I don't believe there is.
So what does it take to get to that 25 mil? Like, what does it take from your position sitting as CEO? What do you need to resource to get to there? Because we've already said racers can't fund racing, and racers certainly can't fund high level pointy end stuff. What does it take to get that piece of the funnel working?
It takes creating a mission, the words we champion cycling, creating that mission and agenda that gets, 500,000 members at $20 a year. That's going to get us there. The market here is plenty big, and we're just not relevant to it. I mean, I don't need to grow the passion for cycling. We just need to contribute in a way that people say this is worth $20 a year.
Okay, so what is worth $20 a year?
I feel like I'm obviously not answering your question. A belief that we can contribute, a belief that our efforts will contribute to a healthier sport of cycling by getting kids on bikes, by funding infrastructure. I mean, if we don't subsidize that insurance, what happens to the racing structure and ride structure? So when I'm talking about events and races, less events and less races is not good for the sport.
So,
I mean, I want to check though. I mean, I'm getting, you're looking
No,
like that sounds great, but what else?
This is precisely because this is the question, right? Everyone's question to you is, why do I pay you for X? What do I get from it? Right. And I think, are we looking at this as consumers of this thing in a way that doesn't make sense? Because we expect we expect you to come over and like do our laundry, when the whole point is we want to believe in an ideal. And instead of us thinking about paying you to come do our laundry, we should be paying you less to just like support an ideal.
Well, I mean, let's divide it in two camps. The racing license is a thing, right? And it allows 20 national championships and 1,500 or 1,800 races, whatever that number is. So let's put that aside. That's a very small community, right? Between 100 and 250,000 people. Now go to people who ride in mass start events, non-race mass start events. What? Let me come at it a different way. Who listens to the NPR? 1 in 10 of us give to NPR.
I do. Wait, do you do it? It's all of us.
No, I do too, but I will tell you that in a focus group, 100% give to NPR.
Correct. Right. In this focus group, yes.
But 1 in 10, I can live with that number. If 1 in 10 believe in either Team USA or Americans competing at the World Championship or getting kids on bikes, that would give me, a 15% share of that 7 million, and we can win as much or better than Great Britain if we have that kind of model. So you are betting on a mission, and are we good stewards?
And Rob, that's the thing.
It right? Is the
like
thing.
That's the thing.
We've talked about it multiple times. Is community. Bikes don't ride themselves. Bikes are fun to look at, but the whole experience of them. Running is fine by yourself, but the whole experience of running with other people and being in that environment is all about that community. And that seems to be where we keep coming back to. And that's where I get to this point. Again, this is like PR advertising guy time of hearing that again is great, but why is USAC struggling so badly with being able to tell that story and create those aspirational athletes and to be able to communicate that vision clearly? And I know that that's part of why you're sitting down and talking with us, but I kind of want to talk about it more on an ethereal level of what is keeping that from being, putting Katie Compton on the wall or putting Kate Courtney or any of the USA riders.
It's clear in my head. Whether I can explain it clearly, you guys will be the judge of that.
Yeah, you sound like us now.
Think about it this way. For a long time, with the tailwind we talked about, racing was enough to get it all done, and the sale of racing licenses.
For sure.
Okay, so that worked, and the Steve Johnson era, and through Derek Bouchard and all, it worked. Now there were cracks in the armor, but it basically worked. Okay. Mix in two things. Those cracks start getting a little bit bigger. Gravel starts growing. We're disconnected from gravel. The license is becoming more important to an aging demographic in a declining segment of cycling, or in growing less than others. I don't want to pick adjectives here, but road was more developed and has been growing less. Mountain biking and gravel was less developed and been growing more. Okay. So it's moving away from our area of strength and away from this product that we sold with unrivaled authority. Okay. Good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm not apologizing for it. We provide a lot for that license, but you can't get it from anywhere else. Well, what I've said is over time, unintentionally that creeps into your being. And John, you said you had a brand background, 100% market shares, you get sloppy, arrogant, lazy. You pick your word.
Yeah, nowhere to go but down.
Right? Now we're trying to make a pivot to stop selling a thing to a few, to sell a mission to a lot, to many. That pivot's hard to do. So, should we be moving faster? Yeah, we probably should. So would I like to have not dealt with a pandemic in the middle of this? I would have liked to,
For sure.
But that's the pivot.
I think that pivot is important, and there is a piece of this pivot that I think is so seminal, because this is the opportunity, and you're doing it with Let's Ride, and I'm really excited to see how that program rolls out. But that is the actual embracing from a corporate stance, from a community stance, from all of us bracing diversity, equity, and inclusion as the way that we actually operate, not just as human beings, but as we operate our businesses. And I know that in July, you guys took some big steps to build a new group within USAC to really look at this. There's some stuff coming out of this. You've done some surveys, which, hey, all, if you're listening to this and you're paying attention, we're 83% white males. Like, shock and amazement, there's 3 of us on this call. It is not unknown that this is a problem of this sport, but this is something you're actively addressing, and that's great. But where are we in this process? What has USAC accomplished, and where are we headed, and what can we look at from concrete goals? Because that really broadens the funnel. If we're trying to build a dream, every single person who doesn't see themselves or see the representatives of USAC speaking to them in an appropriate way, like on the athlete stage, is not going to want to be engaged in that dream that we're talking about. So if we're going to that, like, where are the opportunities and what are we moving forward?
Okay, it's a good question. And I should have brought it and had it in front of me, but we have put a diversity, equity, inclusion team in place. We went out to the community, a broad definition of the community, and we paid people to consult with us, individual cyclists of all sizes and flavors, to come and share their perspective. We did that for most of last year, probably 10 months through about a month ago. We then disbanded that group and went to a smaller working group, and we've got an agenda. The first step we did was we restructured the board at USA Cycling. We went from 22 members with very little diversity to 11 members, with a much broader voice, and quite frankly, a clearer path forward to have no conflicts of interest but growth. I want to be careful how I say that, because I'm not implying anything other than I wanted 4 independent directors that were truly independent, and we have that now. So the board is made up of 4 independent directors, 3 directors from the foundation who gives us money every year, and 4 athletes. And that meets USOPC guidelines, and it meets everything I know about good governance. So that was the first step. The second step is we've changed our hiring practices inside the building, or the proverbial building, as it has turned out to be this year.
And then the imaginary building that doesn't exist, but exists in the magic world of the land we all live in. Yeah.
And we've made progress there. I don't have the numbers to share with you right now, but we're a small group right now. We're 45 people, dedicated people working their tails off for cycling, and we've been able to make that group more diverse and reflect more voices from different parts of the community. And now we got to go outside. And one of the things that we're doing in the insurance subsidy is we're providing it to organizers with a list they can pick from. We don't want to tell them what to do. We want to give them choices of how to make the sport more approachable. So, for example, if it's an event that doesn't have a big women's field or doesn't have a women's category, add it in, and we'll lower the cost of your insurance. We'll subsidize more of it.
That's like That's a very marked, like specific active thing.
Well, and it doesn't require more analog bodies. Like it's
Right.
something that's already within the existing infrastructure that you guys have. That is, it
That's
is
awesome.
the like
That's awesome.
1,000-pound elephant. So yeah, why not try and leverage more of those things without just creating more work?
That's sick. That's awesome.
So we're trying to encourage behavior we think that will make the sport, run a novice category, a true novice category at all the events, so first timers can come out. Put on a Let's Ride camp at your event. And, we're going to do the thing. We're going to try to financially incent, not lecture, not finger wag, incent behavior that says we believe this is good for the sport. If you don't think it is, you don't have to do it. It's your choice. But if you do, we're going to take our, few dollars and try to encourage more good behavior. That's, the second area is in the collegiate program. We have kicked off the first historically Black college cycling program. We're about to name between 2 and 4 more. We've been working, we're very lucky to have Cannondale and EF working with us. And so we're doing what we can in a time when there's not enough to feed every mouth. So could we do more? Yeah, we can. And we're going to try to. As our finances improve, we'll continue to invest into things that make this sport more approachable.
Well, I think a lot of the things that we've talked about that you guys already have in place, those are the things during times like this when it is lean and when finances are either being cut or just non-existent altogether, that you have to lean into the things that these are things we do well, and these are the things that we have to figure out how we can exploit or pull levers on those items. So looking forward, in terms of some of these items that you would like to be able to turn on, or thinking about once we are able to go back to larger events when it is safe to do that, what about outreach beyond kind of the controlled USAC event world? I'm thinking of like the expo for the Flying Pig, or Iceman has a giant expo, and putting USAC and representatives in front of athletes and participants in these events, that just to put a face to a name and to put some sort of emotive connection behind the brand to reach out to people even more directly.
I mean, we're going to do conceptually those things. I don't think we'll do it at a lot of expos. I mean, I'm not a big fan of kind of spray and pray marketing. I'd like to see really specific objectives that are measurable. And I'm not sure hanging signs for us is going to do it. What I can tell you is that, we're talking to the new leadership at NBDA. We want a relationship with the bike retail community. We want to help them, and we want to drive cyclists to their local stores. I'm a big fan of specialty retail. Obviously, my 12 years in the running market, that business is driven by, the not the Dicks of the world, the Dick's Sporting Goods of the world. And I got to make sure I frame that right. Dick's Sporting Goods.
Watch out! Hold on, that's the clip we're pulling. Everyone, this is the clip we're pulling right now. This is the clip that we're pulling for.
He was talking about cycling, wasn't he? No,
exactly.
Not the Dick's Sporting Goods of the world, but the marathon sports and I'm trying to think of the guy in Cincinnati who I knew pretty well, and his name's slipping my mind.
Bob Ronker.
Bob Ronker's stores. I mean, I want to have that kind of relationship with Heather Mason and her NBDA staff, but that means we got to give them something, not take something. And so we're in the business right now of figuring out what that is. Why does every kid's bike not come with a USA Cycling membership? I mean, that's like a no-brainer. I mean, just
Sure.
Really? Come on. I don't know if they'll stick, but let them sign up. Let them get a sticker. Let them get a hat. Let them say, hey, who is Kate Courtney?
Right.
Who are these athletes? And so we got to do those outreach programs, and a lot of those are under construction right now.
It's good to hear there are things under construction, because I think this is the piece that's hard for us who who don't know what's going on under the hood, right? Like, as we've said repeatedly, there is a box, even though it's an invisible pretend box that no one actually goes to. It is a box that we don't always get to see inside of and understand what's happening. But it sounds like there's machinery moving right now, Rob, if I'm hearing you correctly, that there's machinery moving that's starting to put some different pieces in place. And the community needs to let you know through this forum and other forums where we want to see this move, but also needs to understand that this process of turning the Titanic is challenging.
Well, let's not refer to the Titanic because it didn't end well.
Okay, well, okay, maybe I don't know, something cooler that crossed the Atlantic more than once.
We've done, I agree with you completely. And, simple examples, we didn't talk about the high school festival. So we put on 19 national championships right now. And that is for a staff of 5 people that are direct staff members, that's a lot of national championships. And I think the quality of what happens is pretty good. Yes, we get complaints that it was too hilly, too flat, too hot, too cold, too humid, too dry, no matter where we put it, but so be it. But, we added the high school festival this year. It's coming up in July. And it's on the front end of the Mountain Bike Nationals. It's an all-comers event aimed at high schools and teams. And I don't want to say it's not as competitive, but it is not as competitive. It's designed to let teams ride as teams, fast and slow. And we're going to try to bring in all the collegiate programs. So high schools can, in essence, go to a college fair and figure out, when NICA is over, what do I do next? When I graduate from high school, if you know about Fort Lewis or Marion, you're fine. But what about the kids that don't?
Right.
And does UC have a cycling program? And if not, why not? And what does it take to get one started? And maybe it's a club, maybe it's varsity. I don't, know the specific, but we created this event simply to match the kids coming out of high school mountain biking programs that want to continue. And so, those are the kinds of outreach programs that they're underway. That one was announced a number of months ago, and we're going to have the first one coming up this year.
So if these are the things that are happening, right? Like, and maybe there's a press release, I feel like I didn't even know that was a thing. And I feel like I pay attention, or at least I try to. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, why are we missing this opportunity to understand this piece of the story of what's going on inside the 4 walls?
Well, it's a hard question for me to answer for you and others, but I do think.
Well, you don't need to trot someone out here and then just beat them with a stick, but
we need to do a better job at storytelling. There's no question about it. And as I said earlier, as we shift from selling a compliance-based product where, the Department of Motor Vehicles doesn't tell you a story about what's happening, they just make you come get the license. We've got to make that pivot to tell a story like any brand or any community does. And it's undeveloped muscle for us right now. And it's particularly undeveloped muscle in a year where we're dealing with a 50% drop in revenue. So I don't want that to sound like excuses. We got to play the hands we have. We have successfully, when the pandemic hit, we gathered our team and said, look, we're going to make some hard choices, but we're going to make them now in March because we're going to live to fight another day. And, it hasn't been released. It won't be released till the next 990 came out. But John, we didn't lose $1.7 million last year. We broke even. And
which is more than so many other businesses can say for 2020.
That's bananas.
But it's nothing to brag about. We broke even because we pulled back and said, we're going to live to fight another day.
Right.
And this is not the day.
Right.
So let's pull back. Let's keep our powder dry. We have a plan. 20 was not the year we were going to run it. In 21, you're starting to see it. We're optimistic about the back half of the year event and race calendar. And we made the youth free. We thought about this last year too. Said, well, let's not do it this year because nobody's racing. And, so if the audience, you speaking for your audience is saying, hey, tell your story better, I'm 100% on board. You're right. We need to tell it better.
Well, here's my whole stance on this is every single person riding a bike, pinning a number, lining up at a mass participation event is potential content for USAC. Like the idea that somehow me as guy lining up for cyclocross event or gravel race or whatever is somehow distant from the world of USAC or NICA or anybody else that is a part of our world of bikes and our community. And again, it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of all of this, was that this whole idea of othering, that if you're in BMX, you're not in mountain bike and you're not in triathlon or you're not in road cycling or cross or whatever. And it's like that idea is, from that perspective, is like high level insanity. But from a like telling a story perspective, like it's a lower level of insanity to think that somehow it's not up to me and it's up to Doug and it's up to you when you're riding to be a content creator and an advocate for bikes. It's not, that doesn't fall solely on USAC's shoulders. There's a lot of things that you guys can be party to and that you guys can do that are going to reach a lot more people a lot quicker. Sure, that's fine. But I think the challenge is that if there's something going on with our show and Doug is occupied with work and I have the bandwidth, it's up to me to pull that weight for a minute.
Yeah, you got to pull that rope.
And that's where I think during a global pandemic, that's where it becomes really important for the Great Reset for everybody within this cycling community to actually maybe get that through their heads, that we're all on this same team, because this is a small fraction that not many people know about, let alone know that you can race your bike or that there's this whole infrastructure and subculture around bike racing.
No, I agree completely. I think an example that comes to mind in the middle of, it was probably April or May, I'm forgetting exactly, but Chuck Hodge and Tara McCarthy and a number of other people on our staff put together the COVID guidance on, look, I don't know when you're going to be able to come back with an event in your area, but when you do, here's a long list of steps, precautions, safety measures that we know will let you come back faster, better, stronger. We made that available to everybody, whether you were a sanctioner or not. We didn't care. We went to the gravel community. We went to everybody and said, we want you back, with us or independent, doesn't matter. We want you back.
Right.
And I think it was a great example of some of the best work I saw done by any sport on how to come back safer, better, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
And we made it open source. We're not going to sit on it and hide it and say, these are just for the people that sanction with us.
Absolutely.
We invited everybody, and we will continue. Go ahead.
I think that was important to do in that space.
And we want to continue to do that. We want to champion cycling. If it wins us favor, yes, that is part of what we're after. But more importantly, if it keeps kids on bikes longer and gets more people riding as families, and out of that, more people come to mass start events, and some of them matriculate to racing, perfect.
Right.
We'll end up winning more medals.
Yeah.
It's
how you broaden the funnel, right? You got to broaden the funnel someplace. I always have this conversation in the IMBA land here locally, right? My thing, I always had this drawing that was in the back of every notebook, which is a hump, which is we have no beginner trail, a lot of intermediate trail, and no hard trail. I don't care about the hard trail. I only care about the beginner trail because I got to broaden the funnel. You got to get people into the thing.
I think that's exactly right.
And I think it's important that we, before we get into the AMA, I think there's one last topic, and this was probably, of all of the submissions that we had from everybody, kind of in doing our research, that was the most prevalent. Yes, it is the hot button topic. But I think we can do it quickly because honestly, I think it dovetails into everything that we were just talking about in terms of community awareness and the importance of what this community means outside of the cycling community, and it's the ODA. So for anyone that wants to go look this up, there was a great podcast done with you, Rob, and Jim, and Jesse Anthony, and a whole host of people who talk in depth for, I think it was a solid hour, about the ODA specifically. But I think the thing that I take away from all of that is everything that we've been talking about for like the last 15 minutes is the position of cycling in a broader community. The ODA is the perfect, like, this is the medicine that I think we need to swallow to understand where things fit. And I go back to this $10 million for the quarter, so $2.5 million a year for the Olympic Development Program. Not many people on here have run a team or understand what it takes to run a domestic pro team or any of the support structure that comes with that. So I haven't either. I've run a local club team, and I understand that it gets really expensive really quick, but that's not coaches, that's not nutrition, that's not housing, that's not any of that other stuff. So I always personally go back to the things that make sense to me. And the things that make sense to me are growing up in racing and my wife being a college administrator. And currently, a year of college average across the country is $25,000. So split that in half. If that's your transition from being, child, amateur, to that like pre-professional into the professional realm, it's fairly comparable. Looking at it even more specifically, if I look into my like racing realm and the things that people are doing right now, rent-a-ride programs exist in all facets of the NASCAR development spectrum. And the further down you go, the cheaper they get. But you're looking at $40,000 as a bare minimum to get into a race. And that is like a 7th tier. To get into one of the ones that's actually on TV, you're looking at 6 figures for a race just to get the opportunity. But I think all of this, looking at $10,500. That was the article. Oh my God, it costs this much. They're taking advantage of blah blah blah, and the positioning of that being what it was, focusing on the dollar value. I personally take away that it focuses more on the fact that we as a community need to do a better job of telling our story as to why bike racing is awesome. So companies like Procter & Gamble and Gillette and New Balance and all these other people with deep pockets want to invest in it and want to be part of the Olympic Development Program and give you more money to develop athletes that can then work its way downward into inspiring other people. So it kind of becomes this like weird, at least in my head, and I'm going to ask kind of your synopsis of it, like a weird tailspin of, okay, this is what it costs. And I know you're probably going to talk about how that message was put out into the world. But for what you get out of it, you're leaning into all of the millions of dollars of resources that USAC has built and acquired over all of its time. So yes, it is worth it, but you have to look at it in tandem with things that are comparable across the spectrum of developing yourself as whatever profession you want to be, whether it's a pro cyclist or it's a graphic designer or it's, accountant. Like all of those things, that transition piece is incredibly expensive, and there's a reason for that. And there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of resources and things like that come to it. So I think I would rather than talk about why does the ODA cost so much, because we can, in the show notes, link to that podcast and they dive into all of that. I more want to talk about what you look at the future of the ODA being, but also your response to how most of the world found out about the ODA program.
I'm trying to think how to give you something new that's not just a repeat of what's already been said. But, I'll start with elite athletics in any sport. My experience is very expensive. If anybody's had a kid who plays hockey, they know that firsthand. Even baseball, where you think about, what's the big team in Cincinnati? We used to compete against Midland, I think they are. That's a machine. And I don't know anymore because my kids are grown, but I think back when my kid was playing baseball, Midland was $4,000 a season, something like that. Elite sports, traveling teams, whatever the local language is, is expensive. And it's expensive, but almost always underfunded. I don't know of many of those that make any money. You know, our number, it wasn't backed into based on what it was going to cost us. What was backed into was, what does it take to put together a good semester of experience to take the kids that have the appetite, have the commitment, and want to do this. I don't understand how we got in trouble by saying, here's what that costs.
I don't think you necessarily got in trouble by saying, here's what it cost, but I think the situation rolled out that became the byline, is this is what it costs to go do this thing, instead of someone being like, you're getting the Harvard education and now here's the cost. And I think the you know, what the community is actually really interested in right now is not the cost. That's not actually important to the community, right? There are people who can afford to help their kids do that sort of thing. But I think where the community is actually really interested right now is to find out where USAC's, toe is on the line, as far as what is your benchmark and where can you put your stake in the ground about who you're going to be able to fund from a scholarship perspective, and what your outreach into diverse and like BIPOC communities is going to be with that. Because I think that's where the community is concerned about this. Sure, if you have the funds to put your kid through this and they might be good enough to do this, of course you're going to apply. But it's more about, where are we going to engage with, communities of color and people who may be disadvantaged, and where is USAC on that with this program? And I think that's the piece that we want to hear about, because I think that's what we've heard from our constituency, saying, hey, where's USAC at on that?
Okay, it's a very fair question. And I think, we started, and it was down at the very bottom of Fred's article, if I'm remembering the article right, nowhere near the clickbait headline. We want to put 20% of the kids to be on scholarship. Now, people will come to me and say, hey, 20% is not enough. Well, it's certainly enough based on who's lining up in races today.
So is that 20% of the total applications, or is that 20% of the people applied are people of color in that space?
We can't control who applies. So it's not that. I mean, in a lot of this, you're asking for specificity for a program that's never happened yet.
Sure. Well, sure. Right.
Okay.
I'm just building
this thing as we go. We've said what our intention is, that this is not the sale of the national team. This is a supplement below it for kids who are coming out of programs. And, what happens to the 11th kid on the hot tubes or the Avolo program? Today, they got nowhere to go.
Right.
So we want to give them a place to go. We want to do it in partnership with Avolo and all the people that run programs like that. And we want them to graduate up as they would if they achieve and they feel like it's worth it. We want to get 20% of the participants financially supported. I don't have that money to start with. I don't have any of it.
Sure.
We got to go raise it.
Right.
And what I'll tell you, what really does frustrate me is the 2 months since we've announced it, we've spent the majority of our time from talking to people sitting on the sidelines about what's wrong with it, instead of out finding the revenue to get those 20% of the kids through. That's my fault, not yours, not your members, not my past members' fault. But the noise that's been created, the negativity that's been created, are the same people that send me a note, after the World Championship saying they're embarrassed to be Americans. You can't have it both ways. All right. If we want more kids winning, we need more kids in the program. If we want more kids in the program, we got to be willing to make the tough choices that get that paid for, either by their families and their own methods or by our help. And it's going to be a mix of that. So we want 20% of the kids there on scholarship. We don't have the money identified yet. And as soon as I kind of stop defending what got reported the way it did, we'll go out and start looking for sponsors for that.
Yeah.
And I'm being a bit facetious. Obviously, already we are.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Think of the energy. If I could get $100 from everybody who had a problem with the program, I'd probably get 6 or 7 more athletes through this program.
Right. And therein lies, again, back to this whole communal piece. And I think that's my, in digging into all of this, that's been my takeaway is I keep coming back to this. Why the hell are cyclists so mean to each other? And why do we keep having to have the same conversation over and over and over again of no matter how that program was released, somebody was going to be pissed about it. And you said it yourself that don't change anything. Everything is broken, but how dare you change anything or even talk about changing anything, even though I'm going to complain that everything's broken because I want to complain that everything's broken. So
we're very confident, is 10.5 the right number? And we don't know. We got to go try this.
Yeah.
But we're not intending, nor will we keep $1. In fact, we're overfunding it to contribute to it so it can happen. We've got, I think Jim's sitting on over 400 applications. So there is demand. Wow. Is the distribution of that demand the way we want it to be? I'm sure it's not. Of course it's not. And so we're talking to people that can help us reach kids that maybe they're coming out of, some of the inner city crit programs or the programs that are out there. We want to find those kids.
That's what I want to hear, Rob. That's what we want to hear. That's what this community wants to hear, Rob. We want to hear that you're putting the work in those spaces because that's what's important to us long term.
I mean, I'm in total agreement. I mean, I just can't, that's
right,
that.
But like this is where we want you to trumpet those things, right? This is that going into those inner city crit programs, finding those kids, telling them there are these opportunities. This is where
I agree.
Have to, as a community, grow, because if you look at historically over the past year, where all of cycling has grown in the past 10 years, 90%, 98% of the growth in cycling is from African Americans. The number of underappreciated and unrecognized cyclists, if you drive downtown in any major city, those are Black and African American people on bikes, right? There's this massive opportunity. So to hear you say that we're going to go to those places, that's what the community wants to hear you say, Rob. And thank you for saying it, because
now we got to do it.
That.
Now we got to do
it.
Whether it's the Let's Ride camps or ODA scholarship,
Amen.
Free licenses, we're on that road. We got a long way to go. And we're willing to be held accountable. I mean, we published the 83% white male.
Right? Yeah.
God, that had to be hard.
But it's like really literally this
podcast. Everybody knew it.
Yeah.
But we put the numbers to it, and we'll measure again.
Right.
And I will also tell you that we cannot do that single-handedly.
Amen.
If the industry doesn't work together, it's not going to be enough.
It is hard to sit up on a mountain and say, all of you people do this thing for all of us. We have to all work together. And this takes everybody across every cycling discipline in your local community and all of these spaces to start to push this forward. Because if we're not doing this, we won't get where we want to be. We can complain about where we are. That's fine. But we all need to understand that whether it's USAC or IMBA or People for Bikes or your local club or whatever, we all have to be doing this hard work. Now, we're all going to look at USAC and say, hey, USAC, provide an example. And I know that you're doing the hard work right now because you've just said it on this show to do that. And we appreciate that, but we all have to dig into this space together.
I agree.
Well said.
So speaking of complaining to USAC, I'll use this as your last chance for everyone watching to submit your questions for the AMA. We have a ton that we have already accumulated, but
Rob, are you okay? Rob, do you need a bathroom break?
I'm good.
You're good?
Okay,
all right.
Rob's good. Rob's good.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us on the Gravel Lot. This has been awesome. It's been eye-opening, not only talking to you, but for Doug and I doing the research and really digging into a lot of these things and seeing outwardly some of the fractures that we've talked about today, and hearing you address them. frankly, it's really good to hear somebody say, this is the lighthouse that we want to row towards. These are the things that we're trying to go get. I wish you the best of luck, and whatever we can do to help with telling that story and being part of that community, to being able to help tell that story. I hope for the people that were listening, watching, that you feel like you got something out of this, that you're going to get something out of the AMA. But again, similarly to how we introduce the show, normally we ask people what the one thing you want them to remember from today's conversation is. But for today, I'm going to change that, because I go back to, again, this mission vision of youth infrastructure racing. So for the listeners, for all the Pebbles, for the watchers, for everybody that's consuming this content, can you give them 3 things to consistently check back and hold USAC accountable for over the 2021 calendar year?
Yeah, I mean, it's this idea that we see ourselves sitting in the center of a big ecosystem, and we want to champion cycling. That means our programs and the programs of others. We're particularly going to focus on youth, on infrastructure, and on winning at the highest levels. And that's what we want to be held accountable for.
That's clean. We can get little lighters or whatever. We can get virtual lighters in the COVID era and hold your virtual feet to those things. And I think those are good lighthouses.
And the interesting thing about those is they're not necessarily a specific thing. So it's
like we're going to go win a gold medal.
It's a little bit up to everybody's own interpretation of what infrastructure means, or what winning means, or what youth development means. So,
well, I am guarded. I'm a little sensitive to that, because we've got specific measures behind it. It's, youth, it's kids on bikes. That's pretty easy to get at. Infrastructure is, are there events near me I can get to? Good events near me I can get to. And we measure that absolutely. And winning is, and I tell Jim Miller this all, he's the only guy I know who gets his performance review in the USA Today for 20 days in a row every 4 years. It's simple.
Yeah.
We need to win at the highest levels. We've said we want 7 medals. We want to win more women's medals than anybody else, and we want a medal in every discipline. So we do, if those sound vague and squishy, they're not. There's hard measures behind them. Now, whether they're the right measures for everybody, I'm sure they're not. This is a sport where everything's important, particularly my pet duck. And, we run through that. But we've got specific measures behind every one of those strategic planks.
I like that. I like how I pushed a little bit, and you knew exactly what I was pushing on. So I appreciate that. I like very specific things, like you either check the box or you don't check the box. So that it makes all of those follow-ups a lot easier.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to take a moment of a breather here to thank the folks who've made this happen. Then we're going to come back and touch some business and get some of your actual questions, give Rob a break from talking here. So as always, a huge, massive thanks to all of you, our Pebbles, old Pebbles that you've been around, you're well worn in the gravel lot, or new Pebbles, you joined us tonight for the first time. We're very glad to have you. We'd love to have you back, but we cannot do this without your support. So make sure to subscribe, click the like button, visit thegravellot.com and engage with us. And frankly, become a Patreon supporter today if you can. It allows us to bring you this content.
So you're probably asking yourself, we just got done talking about perceived value and what am I getting out of a registration. So Doug,
correct.
What can people expect by being a Patreon supporter of TGL?
Well, first you get our undying and everlasting gratitude, which is a thing that is very
it's real. It's real.
It's very real,
real
for sure. But more than that, you get access to all the personal AMA videos. Again, if you've got AMA videos, if you've got AMA questions for us, send them to us. We're putting together a whole list of things we're going to answer on camera for all of you. Sneak peeks at all the new projects we're working on. We have some big ones with some big folks happening, and anything else that we can possibly begin to think of. You can submit your questions for those AMAs via any social platform, or you can use our contact form on the website, or you can use our new text/voicemail number, which is 513-400-5577. And you can leave us weird voicemails or ask us random questions, and we'll try to address them on the AMA
Maybe.
on our Patreon.
Depends on how weird they are, really.
Yeah, it's like legitimate, like keep it within a box of
Yes.
reasonable questions
Yes.
you think we might answer.
Yes. So in addition to that support, keeping the proverbial lights and internet running and videoing and all of that stuff, keeping things running here at TGL HQ West or East in Eastern, more East. What
More east.
for East? We encourage you guys to find our sponsors, find their website, find their social media platforms, follow them, get engaged with them, purchase their products, and really show them some love and thank them for supporting this show. And the first one is Be Free Ride Bikes. You guys should know by now, we've been working with Be Free Ride Bikes for a couple years now. They make absolutely next level kit that is customizable down to, you can pick the neck, you can pick the jersey fabrics, you can pick all of the individual things on how they fit you, in addition to the graphics that you want. And plus, it is a small family-run company, so it is next level customer service. So there is realistically no reason why you can't get exactly what you want from Be Free Ride Bikes. Plus, this year they are coming up with some retail jerseys, so you guys can kind of get into the waters a little bit cheaper by buying just one jersey and one pair of bibs from their website at bfrbcycling.com. So please go check them out and see how they can help you get either yourself or your entire team outfitted for 2021 and beyond, whenever Rob starts letting people have bike races again.
Thanks, Rob. We appreciate it. So also this week, as always, but first coffee, mad love to our friend Dan. Braved the Austin insanity. Dan, like, we are so glad that you and your family and friends are safe.
And got his second shot this week.
Yep, and got his second shot
twofer.
this week. So he's all good in that space. Dan has been supplying coffee to us and so many wonderful folks in the cycling community for so long. If you do not know Grimport Brothers, you should go check them out. Go to grimportbrothers.com now. Get your hands on amazing, beautiful coffees that, for the most part, go back to benefit people in the cycling community. Amazing people who need support. Dan provides it. So if you like coffee and you like bikes, the only thing you should be doing is going to grimportbrothers.com right now and get yourself on the subscription service so you can earn a free bag of coffee as soon as you sign up.
And also by BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop here in Cincinnati. Mitch offers you a full host of bike fitting services that are really intended to give you the most efficient, comfortable, and sustainable bike fit you've ever had. Both Doug and I have done this. My fit was very off, and as somebody, and Doug is the same way. I'm 6'4". Bikes generally don't fit me very well. Doug is a little bit shorter, but his arms are honestly just as long as mine are. So bikes generally don't fit him very well either. And Mitch got us sorted out between his Guru Fit bike and the retool services. If he can't help you figure it out, no one's going to. And he's got people driving from 5, 6, 7 hours away during a global pandemic to get bike fits. So clearly he's doing something right. So again, that is BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop, located right here, actually right up the road from us in Madeira here in Cincinnati.
And always the Ritual All Natural Skincare in from the jump, because John founded the company, but now moved aside, and Mitch and his lovely wife have taken over the company. We are so glad that they are still a sponsor of the show. If you need private label, handmade, all natural skincare, for the parts that touch the bike and not just your hands, you know where to go. Ritual All Natural Skincare right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Contact us. We will get you hooked up with them. If you want to get your own custom blends, they will make that work for you. We are so thankful they are still part of our team and have been since day one.
And last but not least is Hand Up Gloves. They provide you amazing gloves and apparel for bikes, snow sports, and golf. You guys should know by now, a range of designs, no matter what your personality is, no matter what your fashion taste is, they got you covered. They are getting ready to drop their spring line in just a couple days, actually. So click the link in our show notes and use code Pebble $sign at checkout to save 10% off every single thing in the Hand Up store. Whether you hear this in February 2021 or whenever, it's still going to be active. So make sure you go do that and get a discount on some rad stuff. So we love hearing from all you guys. Make sure to visit, subscribe to our social feeds, hitthegravelot.com, stay up to date. Hopefully, you know by now, every Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Streamlabs. We're going to be going live with conversations like this. Maybe not everyone's going to have a cool title like Rob has, but they're all really
Rob's
cool
got a
people
special
with
title, so
cool people with interesting stories. So
Exactly.
hopefully we keep you guys entertained, and we're going to be continuing to put out new content, new products, things like that. We've kind of insinuated some of that stuff. So if you are a Patreon supporter, in the next couple days, you're going to start to see some stuff with a new project that we're going to work on. Hopefully that's going to come to the world in March. And it's with two people who have been past guests on the show, and we are really excited
We're
to
not
be
going to
working
talk
on
about
it.
anymore, John. Be quiet.
Nope, we got to dangle. You got to tease the
You got
carrot
to
a
join
little bit.
Patreon. You got to join Patreon if you want to hear about it, for sure. Our intro and outro music is from Wadaboy. Please thank him for the jams. Go and spend some money and give him some cash over on the show notes so you can support his beautiful music. So, Rob, I'm gonna ask Rob to unmute now because I muted him earlier because there's like a crow in his neighborhood that has been a constant guest on our show, which is awesome. Could we like to have?
I love the poetry of having a single crow cawing in the background when you're trying to explain very complicated things that USAC is trying to solve right now. There's just some weird dark poetry behind that. So
hope he's not coming for me.
It's not. So let's knock out about 15 minutes of this live stream, and then we'll let you get back with your life. We've got a boatload of questions from so many folks. First off, thank you to all of the Pebbles. Like your support and outreach has been appreciated and so valued. We can't touch on everything that everyone has submitted, but thank you so much from this space. So there's one off the top that I just love because I've heard you say this before, and I want you to explain this because this is a question that came in. You have come from running, which is widely known for being welcoming, right? Hands out. So contrast this and tell us why you think cycling is so cruel to itself.
I wish I could answer that, Doug. I don't think I can. I do know that there are differences, the competitive nature, the categorization, the safety issues that come from, I told the story earlier about my daughter and I being pushed up to the front gate. And while it was traumatic, it was over in a mile or two. And that obviously doesn't happen in a bike race. But I will tell you this, that the days I get frustrated with the helpful feedback I get from my current and past members, I remind myself that it's their love of the sport that makes that happen. So if we can harness that passion that sometimes materializes as anger, I mean, it's better than nobody caring, that's for sure. But I do think if we would work together, the big we, and USAC has a big role in that. I'm not pushing this off on other people. We need to be a more welcoming, more friendly organization, and we're trying. I know I got a staff in Colorado Springs and around the country that are 100% here by choice. They're not doing this to get rich. Nobody does. Not in this sport. They're doing this because they love the game.
Right.
They love it. And they work incredibly hard. And, we make mistakes, but I don't know. I do wish I could find some words that would help tone down the anger that exists with, maybe it's a longing for how the sport used to be. I don't know, but it's powerful. It's powerful. That's for sure.
Well, I think back to a lot of, I want to say that this was like something that Dale Earnhardt said, but it also goes back to like things that you hear from any entertainment industry is as long as they're making noise, whether it's cheering or booing you, it's fine because the passion's there, whether it's love or vitriol. Like at least from again, from an entertainment perspective, but I think
No,
I like
press is bad press. No
yeah.
press is bad press.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
I think we proved about 15 minutes ago that there is some press that's bad press. Okay, so next question is, what do you as USAC see as the path back to racing? And I think beyond a little bit further, what do you need to see from whether it's a national level or a herd immunity perspective, or like what are the bellwethers that you're looking for some sort of path back to racing?
You know, it's a timely question because we recently announced our full national championship schedule this year, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And then just, I think 2 days ago, Tara McCarthy had to cancel the collegiate. We knew that one was going to be risky for 2 reasons. It's super early in the year. I think it was in May. And most of the colleges didn't have a season. So, you know, I want to, either you or Doug, I'm forgetting now, at the end of the last one said when we're going to let you go back racing. Like everything else, this is not in our hands, right? It is in the hands of both local governing oversight and good judgment. And I think, you know, Chuck and I talked about this a year ago, that the go light is going to be even harder to read than the red light we got back last year in March. He and I physically were at Mid-South with Bobby and at that event when we pulled the plug. I was technically going to ride it, and my team begged me not to because I'm trying to remember now, it was March 10th or something, and COVID was coming down. And they said, what kind of example is that if you're out there, you know, taking way too long to finish way too long a ride at this time of the world? So, you know, we're going to do everything we can to bring racing back as fast as we can. We're confident about the back half year. You know, I think it's a combination of government, you know, allowing mass events to happen and us having good practices with our hardworking organizers to pull it off. We've already canceled one national championship this year. I hope it's the only one, but I just don't know yet.
Okay. So this one, there's a little bit of a lead in, but I think it goes back to something. There was a little bit of a back and forth you and I had that I think this opens up you to talk about it a little bit more fully, and give some perspective on it. So, safety is listed in the mission of USAC. While USAC has been exuberant in communicating about their new diversity and inclusion initiatives that have emerged from the cultural conflict that has culminated in the past year. However, does USAC have any plans to make structural changes to ensure that all participants feel safe at USAC events? And I think they're using safe. Maybe they wanted to use air quotes in this. For example, a hate speech policy, which I think opens up kind of our little back and forth about Chloe and Quinn, in terms of adding something like that to policies and procedures within USAC events.
Yes, we are trying to make every event safe, welcoming, and I kind of put welcoming in air quotes because everybody's got a different definition of that. And certainly what the crowd just looks like is part of the challenge that this sport has right now. But yes, we are. We're trying to, you know, as I said earlier about subsidizing insurance rates, we're trying to encourage good behavior, not penalize bad behavior, if you will, and make that shift to be proactive, define what will make bike rides and races more welcoming, and then work to try to accomplish that. Will we get it right on every time? I'm sure we won't. I mean, these are, I don't know how about you. I find these to be very difficult times in execution. They're not so difficult in what you want to stand for, but we've got a lot of kind of conflicting situations that there are right answers for some that are wrong for others, and we've got to pick our way through that. We are trying to take the high road. We're trying to do what's right for the sport. We'll be right sometimes and we'll be wrong sometimes, and when we're wrong, we'll admit it and we'll move forward and try to correct it.
So let me ask, you wanted to put a pin in it, but earlier on, I brought up using Chloe and Quinn are not maybe the best shining examples of someone to shoot for from a USA cycling athletics perspective. I guess this is probably a great opportunity from your perspective, and you partially covered it in terms of rather than reacting, trying to be proactive and figure out how to help people move forward, because I think that's what a lot of us are struggling with is we're all going to screw up every day. and the three of us on this call look like the problem. Like it's kind of a joke, but
100.
it is true. If you look at the bike industry, like it looks like us, and that is the problem. But for those people that screw up, what is your take on that piece of it
moving forward?
Yeah.
Well, a couple things, and I want to, I don't want to get specific to the point where it's not helpful.
Sure.
But the first is, our athlete wellness program, which is a new program that we funded internally to try to help athletes on all kinds of fronts: mental health, career counseling. Part of it is what historically people my age we used to call media training, but that's very different today when the media is in my hand, way too close to distribution.
Right.
And when the stuff with Chloe happened this summer, I talked with folks at SRAM, I talked with folks at Canyon, and I will tell you just outright, I think the Rafa handling was poorly handled. I've never seen an athlete been called out so specifically. And I try to remind myself that these athletes, and I'm not apologizing or defending. What I'm reminding you is that in some cases, these are 20 and 22-year-old young people who travel the world, but that doesn't mean they're worldly. And there is a difference. And we cannot condone and support, but we also cannot, I don't think we should, judge people by one poorly stated or two poorly stated tweets. And again, I'm trying to not apologize for it, but I'm also not going to throw them out and say, that's it, you're done. And by the way, that's not our place anyway.
Sir, right. So as an organization, right, where do you think your opportunity is to lead in this space for teaching people who are, as you say, 20, 22-year-old kids?
They're still kids.
Yeah. They may not have, do not look into my history. It is probably dark. I've forgotten 10 years. I don't know what I did. And I'm real sorry for all the things I did during that time. But I'm moving forward. What do you think USAC's role in teaching and growing really is?
Well, and I've got my own personal kind of education on this, and I'll give you a little bit of background, but I'm turning to our DEI committee and asking them, because I get really worried as a 59-year-old white guy to say they're just kids. Because if I'm an African-American female coming up in the sport, that's not permission to say things that are wrong.
For sure.
Sure.
And I know that's not what you're implying either, but I want to be careful the way I say. What we're focused on is listening to them to say, what should we demand and expect of our athletes, particularly when they're in the red, white, and blue. It's an important, if I want the plus of that, I got to deal with the negative that comes with it. 100%. And how do we coach them up to understand and realize that they are on stages that are outsized for their personal experience, and they need to understand that. And, this is a discussion I had with somebody on the DEI committee. I want to not disclose it, but that alone's not enough. Just because they don't say it doesn't make it okay. It's really what they believe in their hearts. But, that's a hard thing to get to in the short run. We want to try to help our athletes. We want them to understand the implications of what they like and what they don't like and how they articulate their personal opinion. And then, quite frankly, my own belief, and this is probably the dad coming out, it's reminding them, you're a bike rider. Nobody cares what you think about these other things. Ride your bike, talk about what you know, and be careful when you're talking about things you don't know. And you're just getting to understand that. But, I am reminded that they're just experiences they haven't had yet.
I think you just summed up a whole weekend of media training in 3 sentences. And this is what you do that.
Don't do that thing.
Talk about stuff you care about, and then things you don't know about, just be quiet. That's media training.
The only part I want to add to that is just being quiet. If in fact you believe bad things or racist things or discriminating things, that's not okay. And so we got to get to that, but we got to do it in order.
And I think
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rob.
I don't want to, just because a bad thing doesn't get said doesn't mean it's not still there. And so and that's what my DEI team reminded me, that, hey, it's more than just not saying something that gets you in trouble. It's what do you think? And while I don't have the answer, I'm recognizing, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That is more important.
Right. I think this is incumbent on us as white males, right, to listen to people of color and women and people in that space and say, okay, I don't know, this isn't my experience, and listen. And it allows us to inform how we can help better lead the organizations that we're involved by giving our agency over to those spaces to say, we don't know this. This isn't part of our experience. And let them take kind of that role to guide the conversation. And you're absolutely right. You don't know what you don't know. And we don't, like, yes, kids are kids, but also there is this inherent space that we don't want to give approval to in an appropriate fashion. Say, look, this isn't how we operate this business. I appreciate your answer in that space. That's good to hear that that's the way you're trying to run this organization. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So in 10 years, where do you want to see USAC? That's always a good one, right? Like in 5 years, where do you see your career, Rob? If we're interviewing you, where do you see your career? So in 10 years, where do you want to see it?
I want to see three things. I want to see a lot more kids on bikes and riding bikes and having a path forward to keep riding them. I want to win medals in Los Angeles, similar to swimming and track and field. And I want to see an infrastructure that is collaborative, cooperative, and available to everybody. And yes, John, there are numbers behind those.
I need the numbers. And I think that like, again, like I just keep going back to, like, I think at heart, both Doug and I are storytellers. That's why we like this podcast. That's why, we've been going for 2 hours now and it feels like the blink of an eye. And I think a lot of that comes with just the consistent storytelling and putting it, as Doug said, like it's incumbent on all of us to be a part of that mission of this is what the national governing body wants to do for cycling. And as cyclists, that's what we need to go do. It's not that it's up to the national team, and it's not that it's up to race directors or USAC officials or anybody like that. And no, it's all of us. It's whether you have a membership or not. Like, I don't care. Like, it is up to all of us to be able to tell that story and to get more people, more kids, more access, more rail trail, more natural surface trail, all of those things, like that. It's up to every single one of us. And it's crazy to think that it's up to one specific group to do everything for everybody, because then that's how you end up failing and they go bye-bye.
No, but we can, collectively start a movement that works together that does get those things done.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's see, we got 3 left. So
Yep.
COVID aside, what are the main things that you have come across, the main challenges, the main opportunities, the main headwinds? Define your corporate word here. What are the main challenges that have really surprised you since joining USAC?
It's super hard to say, put COVID aside.
That's kind of been your whole tenure now.
This minor thing that has only been going on for a year.
I say that because, we canceled 20 national championships and 1,800 events. And, this is one of the dirty secrets that I'll share on the podcast. COVID happened last year after our renewal exercise. So while we did have people who asked for refunds, and in most cases we supplied them, the money was in, and it's an amount of money from an individual that I think most people said, okay, I'll let it be. This year, because COVID was so obvious, and under the heading of no good deed goes unpunished, last year we moved away from a calendar program to a floating program. My financial challenge this year is actually much worse than last year, because I've got a third to half of our people, historic members, waiting on the sidelines, deciding, am I going to race or not?
Yeah.
And last year I didn't have that because we renewed in December and January, and then COVID hit in March.
Yep.
And if this had been $1,000 membership, we would have had a lot more requests for refunds, but we didn't have all that many.
Colleges are the exact same time in terms of like the admission season and all of that stuff. It's normally wrapped by January, and it's like I watch it with just like pit in my stomach for my wife every day of like the numbers, and the operating budget is still the same. We need to bring in this many people, and how are we going to do it now that they know what is coming or what's already here?
Well, I mean, we already know the numbers. We're through renewal. We know that there's 25,000 people waiting to see, and we got to deal with that. And in some ways, that makes this year much harder than last year. We did put a guarantee in place. It was well intentioned. I hope it was how it was received. And basically, it works like this: if you buy your membership before the end of this month, so the end of next week, and you don't race in 2021. We will extend your membership for 6 months. That's a well-intentioned effort to try to get people off the sidelines to understand we can't even bring these events back if our membership falls by 30%.
Right.
So that's a short-term challenge, but it's not one that, it's the kind that can really keep you from getting a good night's sleep. We will get through it, but if we get through it, in a bloody way, it's going to just put us that much farther behind getting the WE Championship message starting. So I'm asking our members to re-sign up. Even if you're questioning whether your race is going to happen, we will extend your membership through June of 22 if you don't race. There'll be no questioning. We're not going to, ask you why you didn't race. We're just going to say, fine, if you apply, great. You didn't race, good. We're going to extend it. But that's a short-term challenge we do have to deal with because we got to keep the lights on to get to the future that I think our group has articulated fairly well, but we've been in a period that is anything but normal and almost can't be put to the side.
Yeah. And I mean, if we're rolling to this lighthouse, right, if we're trying to do a thing and you're trying to build the organization to look towards a goal that isn't necessarily based on race revenue, like you still need to have that piece of the revenue coming in to support the thing you're trying to do. So fully understood. All right. I have a tough one. So gird yourself, Rob. This one cuts.
The other ones were easy.
But yeah, the other ones were super easy, Rob. I know you're like, we've been
they're all just openers.
There's all openers for this. So to those who have said that you brought Reggie Miller on board to the board for tokenization, what do you have to say to that audience?
I think they're not doing any research. I mean, that's not a hard one at all. Reggie is an active cyclist, and he is a platform because of his brand that can extend our message. You guys asked me before, why do you not tell your message better? I think Reggie'd be pissed if he heard that, and he's going to hear it because he listens to just about everything in cycling.
He does. He
does. Of course he does.
He totally does. I mean, our sister show, Girls Moving Mountains, know Reggie very well. Like he is part of the TGL family.
So, I mean, I just think that's obviously, I don't even know who would have the audacity to say that. The two African Americans that joined this board in the reshuffle, right here again, don't do anything different, but everything you do sucks. So we had a board with no diversity to speak of. We had gender diversity, but no ethnic diversity. We brought on two African Americans and an Asian female. All three have huge chops in cycling. Ed Ewing in the Northwest, Reggie Miller in Malibu, and Lucia Deng in New York City. So that is a lazy question. I'm sorry, you did not do your research. And if you think that that's why we're going to add people to the board, you're missing the questioner is missing the boat completely. And I don't mean to be harsh.
No,
come on, this is not.
It's an AMA question asked and I believe answered in this space.
It's a harshly worded question that's kind of framed in it. I think it's framed very similarly to kind of what you were saying probably 10 minutes ago about you have to be very, very careful with your word choice. And this is one of those where it's like, oh, you brought Reggie on. That's your, like, it's easy to jump to that conclusion. So I get the logic of where they're coming from.
I don't at all. I
But
truly don't get that logic at all. I mean, this is a sport that's asking for change, and we've got
yeah,
three people that represent not only diversity, physical, ethnic diversity, but perspective diversity,
right.
right? Uh, Reggie's an Olympic athlete, an accomplished athlete, and a national platform that he chose bikes way before we did.
Yep.
Okay. Ed Ewing spent his entire career in bike advocacy, and Lucia Deng has run one of the most important racing clubs in the country. Neither of these three have any right to be considered as tokens.
I think that is the perspective that people need to think about when they think about these questions. This isn't a one-way street here. Like, we ask questions specifically in this AMA because people have them. And it isn't necessarily our perception, but it is important for people to understand both perspectives of this, right? Like, you have a perspective when you come to this, but also understand that you got to do the background of where these people come from, for sure.
Well,
And again, guys, I wasn't implying you didn't do your homework.
Oh,
I just
God,
think,
no.
No.
just think
No,
that
I know that.
that's a lazy question.
And you can,
So,
Rob, feel free to tell us we didn't do our homework. I'm good with that.
That wasn't my point.
And
It does that one. I will tell you that hacks me off because it just people not doing. These are accomplished cycling community members.
And I think your response and that anger is good for people to see. And it's that response is solid because this is like the definition, regardless of what his background is. This is like the definition of how othering happens. That,
Yes.
again, it's like this insular nature of cycling. Like, he's not one of us. How can he understand or how can he contribute to this? And it's like, no, like, he has such a massive audience that could get us to a point of getting more people on bike just by him talking about it and saying that mountain biking is fun and boom baby. Like, those things alone are worth their weight in gold, regardless of any of his athletic endeavors. Like,
But John, here's the thing. It's not like Rob was like, hey, let me find an ex-basketball star and tell him to get on a bike. There's
Yes.
a guy who rides a bike who happens to be an ex-basketball star and an ex-Olympian who's like, hey, I care about bikes. That's the difference we have to think about here. Think about bringing people into our house.
That's a crazy Venn diagram of experiences to bring to the table for USAC. Like, that's a huge get for you guys in terms of the things that he brings to the table.
Well, and I would tell you that on different fronts, Lucia and Ed are the same way.
100%. 100%.
Right.
And I'm familiar with their work from my advocacy space. Like, both of them are tremendous humans in that space. This is what we have to do. Continue to bring people to the table, whether we want to think about it from our outside perspective. We just got to have more diverse voices at the table. I would give my position up 1,000,000 times, even on this show, to have different voices here. So let's continue to do that.
Good.
Okay. Last one. And this is, again, it's another, we have people that I don't know, maybe it's people after my heart. They have a long intro and then they ask the question right at the end. So the largest portion of USAC revenue comes from membership.
John, that's so you.
This figure is not surprising to anyone who has held a USAC membership in recent years. Membership revenue is then presumably a high priority to USAC. Based on that assumption, recruiting new members is vital to USAC's success and is quite apparent in the experience of the participant. For example, limitations of one-day and year-long licenses opposed to seasonal or discipline-based. With that in mind, does USAC have any additional plans to prioritize retention of current USAC members?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And particularly when you think about membership being something more than a license. We don't sell a lifetime membership. I think that's stupid. I don't know what the number would be, $750 or something like that. We don't sell a lifetime membership. We don't sell, the one days. In theory, we use it as a lead generator, but we use it with a paper PDF form. So its lead quality is a little bit more than zero, but not much more. I mean, we've got to get more sophisticated. And again, I go back to Nobody's, I mean, we don't have stupid people and they haven't made bad decisions, but we were coming from a market where the sale, the demand creation was the entrance.
Right.
So we didn't have to make it easy. If we're talking about affinity, it needs to be frictionless. It needs to be right priced. And as I said to you guys earlier, I will never run, I don't have, this is the first time I've ever run a business where I don't have a supply to worry about. I will never run out of memberships. The warehouse is full.
Yep. You're not going to be like, oh
Unlike,
gosh.
One
COVID
thing that
just shut
COVID
down
production
our
hasn't
factory.
shut down.
Right, exactly.
Unlike a component supplier, I can take all demand. So we got to get much more clever and thoughtful about, if you want to just give us $25, you don't want a membership, you don't want anything, you just want to support the mission. We don't make that easy.
Right.
We need to make, today you got to go to the foundation, the USA Cycling Foundation, to do it. We want to make that much easier. So the answer is yes, we need product differentiation that fits different needs in addition to discipline specific or one day or full racing licenses.
That's a good answer to that, because it's got to change in some fashion.
Yeah.
And I like that you're thinking about how to diversify that portfolio. So it's not just one note. You're able to cater to those different spaces appropriately.
That's our hope.
Yeah.
That's our
hope. And the last line of this is in quotes, is for context, higher education institutions almost certainly have multifaceted strategies to retaining students, whether it's educational or it's social or any of the different pieces in terms of all the different reasons that somebody could. And again, it's a very similar model in terms of they look at it as a finite time where you need to maintain and maximize the profit from, it sounds awful, but maximize the profit from that student in the 4 or 5 years that they are at your institution and get as much out of them as possible. So retention, it's a lot cheaper to retain that person than it is to go get a new one.
The only part that's different the way we're thinking about it is I actually don't want to get the most out of you.
Right.
I want to get the longest out of you.
Sure.
And the pricing is kind of irrelevant. Think about, we've been selling licenses. The average license length is probably, we don't exactly know, but it's probably 4 to 5 years. I'd much rather have you for 30 years at a very low number, annually, because the lifetime value and our ability to serve you is much better there. But that's a hard pivot when you've been selling a license.
Yeah. And I got to believe, from your perspective as a sales pitch, making every single year you have to come around to got to do it again. It's not just a re-upping with Amazon Prime. Is you guys are constantly on the hook to justifying the value in your proposition every 12 months to somebody, rather than just like, no, I believe in this and I want to be a part of it for a long time.
Yeah.
It's why we ask people to become Patreon supporters here, because you believe in this show and we would like you to become a Patreon supporter.
That is shameless. That is shameless.
You got me.
It's
I'm signing
absolutely
up as soon as we hang up.
Right, exactly. See, Rob's on board, Pebbles, but
Man.
this is how you become a Patreon supporter of USA Cycling. You may not race, you may not do these things, but maybe you should support the thing that is trying to make things happen, right? So we have to change our thinking and align ourselves with what the mission is supposed to be. And I think it's fascinating watching you come in this totally different space. What, 19 months ago, Rob, are we talking?
Yeah.
And looking at the landscape, a year and a half in the middle of a global pandemic, and trying to figure out how to right a ship that's been beaten around by the seas for so long. And I think it's fascinating. And from our perspective, there's a lot of community feedback, and I think that's good. I think if the opposite was the case, you wouldn't know where you needed to go. And so I appreciate, and John, I know appreciates, and I know all the Pebbles appreciate you taking literally almost 2.5, 3 hours of your day to spend with John and I to talk about this stuff, because this is where we get to have these conversations about the community in a deeper way. And I really want to tell you, thank you from us and the Pebbles. This has been an amazing time to spend with you. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both. I appreciate you giving me that airtime to tell the story. as you both said, it's an area we're trying to keep growing. And I'd end on my side with this. We've got a staff of 45 people that will die for cycling. They will do whatever it takes to try to make this sport bigger, better, and more inclusive. And I'm awed by how hard they work and how much they're willing to do. And I hope we can help harness some of that energy broadly and make this sport a heck of a lot bigger.
I like that as an ask. I mean, we've talked about it now a couple times, is it can't be 45 people doing this. Like, changing the world like we're talking about and changing the cycling world like we're talking about domestically. It's every single person. There's more than 45 people on this video chat right now. So,
So hey, we've doubled the size of USA Cycling.
Just awesome. Like that. But I think to that point, I think it completely constantly underscores that this is together everyone achieves more, like to be cliche and to say team acronym, that Doug and I talked a lot before about, I think a lot of the frustration comes from feeling like everybody is like there is the black box that, you know, that decisions are being made in and no one's getting to see it. And you see it at the local Subway, or you see it at any retail organization or basically any business. If the lower paid employees don't understand the direction that the business is moving in, they start to become feral cats. Yeah. They start to wander and question everything and start to come up with crazy conspiracies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until hopefully no one's storming Colorado Springs. But it would not shock me, as ardent as some USAC folks are. But I think to that point, the more that people can actually open their ears and listen, rather than just talking and hearing what you guys are trying to do. I mean, it like I said at the beginning, it was eye-opening for Doug and I to really dig into the business side of USAC, and square that with a lot of the questions that we were getting, but also make it to where it actually was palatable to have a progressive and like conscientious conversation about how do we all become partners in this and how do we all move this thing forward. So I think just more. Give me more. Like more. You want to come on next week and do it again?
We'll pump whoever it is.
I'm worried about your ratings.
Rob, thank you so much again. Thank you all the Pebbles for joining us. This has been exceptional. We appreciate you taking the time, Rob, without a doubt.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So that is all for this week. So be sure to subscribe, follow, and engage, because as we say each and every week, decisions and trails are made by those who show up. So if you don't show up this time, we'll see you next week. Bye, John.
Bye, Doug.
Thank you.